Hello, everyone. Are you ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered with actionable tips to transform your marketing game? You're in the right place. Welcome to Marketing Demystified. I'm your host, Jenn Mancusi, CEO and co founder of GrowGetter, your growth marketing partner. Happy Leap Day, everyone. Figure it's an extra day in the year, so we'll do an extra live stream today. For those of you sick of hearing me live, this will be my last one for today, I promise. But happy extra day of the year. I hope you're making the most of it. Today, I'm going to talk about positioning. Once companies understand their target buyers, offerings, and have found their place in the market, it's critical to get your brand positioning right. But how do you do that? It's definitely a process. And in my experience, it includes four critical components. And I do a lot of positioning work with clients and positioning workshops. And aside from that, just have a lot of conversations in the space with people about positioning. And the more and more we have these conversations, the more I'm kind of like drilling down these four areas that are really critical. So I want to talk about them with you guys today. But first, what is brand positioning? And in my experience, brand positioning is actually an internally focused concept that's designed to guide and align your team. So it's the sort of defining the place that your brand occupies in the mind of your customers. But this is it. It really is internally focused. It's about being really clear on who you are in the space and to your customers. If done right, your positioning should not change very often. It may shift. It may, if there's a big sort of event in the universe, then that might be an opportunity to revisit your positioning. But ultimately, if it's really nailed down, it shouldn't shift very much. The thing that should shift very much is messaging. And I think that sometimes people get those two things conflated, positioning and messaging. Your positioning is that internally focused concept. The messaging is the translation of that positioning into statements that are benefit driven, specific, depending on the audience segment. Also, the messaging should be changed often. It should be tested and refined. I mean, this is where A/B testing and multivariate testing comes into play. Not to redefine your positioning, but to change how you are wording it and translating it out into the marketplace. Another sort of side component to not be conflated with positioning is your value proposition. There's definitely elements of it that come into the positioning, and I'll talk about that in the four components, but that value proposition should explain how you're different from other companies and why they should buy you now. And like I said, there's moments of that where that comes through in positioning, but that's also a separate piece that should be defined separately. And this matters because it's really important to align internally, first of all, and make sure that your sales team, your marketing team, your leadership team, your customer team is speaking the same language and is consistent in the marketplace. Customers or potential buyers or prospects are having an experience with your brand in a lot of different ways, through your employees, through your exhibit at a conference, through your digital content or emails or advertising. That needs to be consistent. Everyone has to be saying the same thing. So that internal alignment is the kind of critical first step. And the other reason why it matters is it establishes a clear identity in the minds of your target audience. And that's going to create trust and credibility. That consistency creates trust and credibility with the market. So before you kind of even start to think about defining your positioning, it's really important to be super clear on who your target buyer is, who your ideal customer profile is, not only from a maybe demographic or firmographic perspective, but also just understanding their jobs to be done, the challenges that they're facing in their day to day, whether or not you solve them. Understanding them is a really important step. And then more specifically, the problem that you solve for that buyer. That's really important to get nailed down first. Having some product market fit, knowing that, you've got a product that is unique and that is solving a need in the space. And then also, you really need to have a good understanding of the competitive landscape. That's important when you're kind of creating your positioning and your messaging to understand who you're up against and how you're going to differentiate. I see a lot of companies maybe skipping the positioning bit or skipping the sort of the pre-work to the positioning and going straight to messaging or straight to taglines. And those are almost always going to miss the mark. So it's super important to kind of get that foundation really strong before going into any sort of positioning work. So, as promised, the 4 components. The first one that I think is maybe one that companies get wrong the most often is that your positioning needs to be customer centric. And what I mean by this is it needs to, there's a lot of conversation talk about benefits, not features. And that's certainly true, but it's even a little bit one step further than that. Not just talking about the benefits of what you offer, but actually the problem that you solve for your customer. And so the way I like to think about it is, how do you make your customer or your prospective customer the hero in your story? So I think oftentimes there is an inclination to use the positioning to just talk about your company and your offering and your technology or your service, right? And if it's really sort of brand focused or company focused, that it may fall flat. There is this sense of like, what's in it for me? That's really cool that you do all this stuff. Or yes, it seems like you have a great product, but what's in it for me? So if that piece is missing from the positioning and from the messaging, it may not resonate. So I think that making sure that your positioning is customer centric is a really, really important step. So make your customer or your potential customer the hero in your story. There is a difference between your positioning story, your brand story, and your company story. Your company story might be important on the About Us page of your website, the history, why you came to be, the timeline of growth and evolution and innovation in your business. And that is important, but it's not the positioning for the business. So make sure to keep those two things separate. So the second component of positioning that is really important is that it needs to be simple. So one of the challenges that a lot of companies are having is, kind of maybe giving too much information about your offering in the sort of, I'm talking top of funnel, right? Like there's also, we should talk about maybe the sort of experience, brand experience and customer experience down the funnel, but top of funnel messaging, it needs to be super simple. You don't have to give away everything right away. You don't have to give all the information because it's going to be too complex for people who are just getting to know you or just doing some initial research. So, in general, people don't buy the best products. They buy the products that they can understand the fastest. And this is where that simplicity is really important. So talking about all of the great things that your tech does or that you offer is maybe too complex for the positioning and the messaging to get people interested. I always use this example of our phones, right? There are certain companies that really position on features and the megapixels in the camera and the different things that the phone can do. And then there's companies like Apple who really market on more of a experience or a lifestyle that you will adopt by being an Apple customer, right? And the truth is, I have no idea how many megapixels are in my camera. Maybe my phone is not the best phone on the market. It's probably not. Actually, I see some pretty cool stuff and ads for other phones and things like that. But if I don't understand those details immediately, it's taking me too much energy and calories to try to wrap my head around them. I'm going to buy the thing that I understand the fastest. And that's not limited to B2C marketing, that's B2B as well. So making sure you keep that messaging really simple is another critical component. And that's hard. It's actually really, really hard to drill down to a simple message. It's a lot easier to tell all the things that you know and all the great features and even benefits of your business. But getting down to that simple message can be a real challenge. So, not saying any of this is easy, but something to keep in mind as you're working through. The third component is that your positioning has to be differentiated. You can't be making the same claims that everyone else is making in your space. And this is why having that foundation of competitive research and competitive understanding is really important. Um, so, you know, some of you may recall back in the summer, I believe it was, I did a bit of an analysis about the headlines of different companies messaging in booths at a conference. And there were so many that were saying the same thing. It makes it really difficult for buyers to know what's what and what's real and what's really differentiated. So it's super important that you find those unique selling propositions for your business or your product. This can happen if you sort of message your benefits in either too broad of a way or are just maybe focusing on or using too many buzzwords. That's always going to kind of land you in the middle of a sea of sameness. And it's really difficult to stand out. Now, when we talk about differentiation, sometimes people struggle to get to like one thing that is like they're the only ones that do that thing. And it's not actually that it has to be that specific or that exact. There, of course, there's a reason why you have competitors, because there's companies doing same or similar things to you. But my rule is typically, like, if I were to think of 3 unique benefits, maybe each individual benefit does not need to be unique, but the combination of the 3 does. So maybe think about it that way when you're thinking about how to differentiate your offering. Think about the top 3 benefits and how the combination of those 3 are different from what anyone else is offering out there. You don't want to be saying, we're better, faster, and cheaper. A lot of companies are doing that. But if speed is a benefit, of course, other companies are promising speed, but speed in combination with what is what makes you really differentiated. So that's one way to think about that. The final component that is really critical, and I think one that is maybe forgotten sometimes, or sometimes I see some really, really incredible positioning and it hooks you and it's simple and it's driving that next action and people don't know what to do. So that fourth component is a really clear call to action. What do I do now? You've now convinced me to buy from you. You've convinced me, or maybe you've convinced me to do some research and find out a little bit more. You've taken me into that next stage of my journey as a potential customer. But what do I do next? So a really clear call to action is important. Otherwise, even the best positioning is going to be ineffective. So give people simple steps. Tell them how to buy from you or how to engage or what to do, where to go. Read this white paper or check out this blog article. Here's a video. It's super easy to work with us, and here's how. It doesn't require a lot, but showing people the path of what to do next is really important. The other thing here is, I think when companies are thinking about tone of voice, that's one thing I'm sort of not talking about in this conversation is sort of visuals and tone and things like that. But if you are a business that has maybe a more playful tone or, a more casual tone, this clear call to action is an area where that can really mess you up and trip you up. So be careful that in an effort to be maybe creative and out of the box and fun, that you're not confusing your website visitors or your buyers or your potential customers with what to do next. Because if your call to action says something like, let's go for a walk, I don't actually maybe know what that means. So be sure that even if your tone of voice for the brand is not super I shouldn't say super clear. Like, I don't often see brand tones that are not clear. It's more that if they're a little bit more playful and fun and include puns and jokes and things like that, like the call to action should maybe leave that tone out. So make sure you have a really clear path for people to do the next thing you want them to do. So those are sort of the four components that I think are really critical for creating that positioning. And the most important thing to do once you have defined these is to start integrating them into different areas. And this is where the messaging comes in. So you've nailed these sort of, the positioning of the business, and you've checked off these four boxes. Start writing some emails and write some web copy, write some social media posts and things like that. And just do a little bit of a sense check internally to see if it feels like it's hitting the right notes. That's your sort of first phase. And then you want to start testing. You want to start testing your messaging that you've developed as a result of this positioning everywhere. Test it on your website, test it with subject lines in your emails, and be really scientific with how you measure the results. One tip when you're doing any sort of message testing is don't test too many variables at once. So if you are looking to test the language on your website, you want to make sure if you're doing an A/B test, you don't change the headline and the call to action in the same test, right? If you want to do a multivariate test where you have two headlines and two calls to action and you serve up a variety of those combinations, and maybe there's a specific combination that outperforms, that's one way to do it. But if you're just doing like a standard simple A/B test, if you change the headline and the call to action, you won't actually know which one impacted the behavior. So make sure that you're, keeping your tests really simple, or you're doing it properly, doing like a proper multivariate with different combinations and things like that. There's lots of tools out there that can help you do that. Google Optimize is one, although I think that might be going away. So we'll come up with some other recommendations for you to test some of this stuff. But testing live on your website, testing in your email comms, and in social media posts is a great way to kind of see if it's resonating. There's also surveys you can do to test your messaging. Leverage your own technology potentially and your own customers, talk to your customers and say, hey, this is, would this resonate with you? Does this jive with your experience with us as a business? It's a great way to kind of make sure you're headed in the right direction. This is also, that brings up another point. If you're developing your positioning internally, it is really easy to maybe miss something because you're almost too close to it. So sometimes bringing in an external partner, and that may be a customer, or it may be, just someone else in the space or in your network that can help you think about, maybe some of the things that you missed, or just think about it from a third party perspective, and make sure that you are hitting all the right notes in your positioning. So if you are thinking about your own brand positioning and you've ticked off 2 out of the 4 of those boxes, or you're not even sure if it's hitting on all of them or one of them, let me know. Always happy to bounce ideas around and brainstorm on this stuff. But thanks for listening in and tuning in today on this wonderful leap day. I'm really excited for next week's episode. I'm going to be chatting with author and chief evangelist at Canva, Guy Kawasaki. So don't miss it. I'll see you then.